Anybody who follows a lot of Appalachian Trail hikers on social media probably has seen hikers sitting in a shelter during the day while a heavy rain pours down outside. Those who haven't been on the AT might ask why. Is the rain on the trail really that bad? Those viewers also are likely to hear an occasional admonition against camping on the tops of thousands of hills along the AT, and that advice might or might not come with an explanation of why. There is a condition on the AT that is both directly and indirectly related to these questions. It's something I've never heard discussion about, even when listening to somebody talk about the AT. What I'm talking about is wind. Not necessarily gale force winds, but plain old wind of up to about 30 miles an hour. Those who sit in shelters during the rain and avoid campsites on hilltops have their reasons, and I'm not going to question their judgment. But it's also true that I have never woken up on the AT and delayed my departure because of rain. I've also camped on the tops of big hills more times than I can count. In fact, they're one of my favorite places to camp. So if we look at what I do and what those other hikers do, I believe it can give us a perspective on wind that might prove useful when we're on the AT, particularly when the wind is a problem we have to deal with, which certainly can happen. As I've said before, hiking on the AT can be pretty straightforward when we are dry, warm, and the sun is shining, and things can get annoying pretty fast when those things are not happening. Also, I think many of us start out on the AT, or any other endeavor for that matter, with the idea we won't really have any problems. Yet wind can indeed cause problems in the outdoors, particularly since it's usually accompanied by rain, if not snow. And here's an example. Let's say we set out for a week-long hike in the middle of July. Lots of great warm weather in July, so we set out with shorts, a t-shirt, and leave the heavier clothes at home. We're not at sea level, but on terrain that is well above it. Even in July, a cold front can roll in, bringing with it heavy and drizzling rain that can last for 24 hours. When that happens, daytime temperatures can fall from the 80s Fahrenheit to as low as the 50s, especially at those higher elevations. And if it does, forget about a 30-mile-an-hour wind. A 20-mile-an-hour wind is going to be nasty if we don't have the clothes for it. If by comparison, we have a good rain jacket with us and a long-sleeve fleece pullover, or even a flannel shirt, we'll be in much better shape. The U.S. National Weather Service, by the way, has a wind chill calculator. If the temperature is 50 degrees Fahrenheit and the wind is 20 miles an hour, it feels like 44 degrees to us. If the wind is 30 miles an hour at that same 50 degrees, it feels like 42 degrees. And 42 degrees is just plain cold. And that would be a very nasty surprise if we're expecting nothing colder than the mid-70s. And again, it's raining in that scenario. The wetter we are, the more unhappy we will be. So, for the record, if somebody is waiting out rain in a shelter or a tent, I will not criticize them. Consider, for example, that rain on the AT almost always means lots of mud in plenty of places. And if it rains enough, some sections of the trail will flood, turning into a small creek. Rain is a packaged deal on the AT. But a question, why don't I stay in my tent during rain? The answer centers on the fact I've had loads of experience getting stuck in rain long before I thought about the AT. This stems from earlier hiking, camping, and bow hunting trips. I learned to take it for granted that wherever I go, rain is going to pour all over me and badly, no matter what. I tried rain jackets and umbrellas in the outdoors, but nothing has ever kept me drier than a poncho, and I mean never. I know, a poncho has a big disadvantage. We look like a nerd wearing a poncho. A rain jacket is much more fashionable. Well, the rain on the AT can be a nightmare, and I did an earlier video about that, links in the description. Nightmares are indifferent to fashion. This photo gives you an idea why I use a poncho. Virtually everything is covered except my hands and lower legs. Ponchos are routinely accused of flapping around in the wind. The poncho in this photo will not do that because I tied the back corners in front at my waist. What I call a good poncho, like this one, has loops on all four corners. If we tie short cords to the back corners and tie those cords in front, flapping is greatly reduced, if not eliminated. Some ponchos lack these kinds of loops, and I won't use one on the AT. I have two Frog Togs ponchos. One of them is a lighter emergency model. Neither has loops. I was happy to buy them, but I keep them in my car. I know what some people might be thinking. Today we can buy good rain jackets and waterproof packs, so what's the problem? Well, I can't speak for those staying in shelters during rain, but I once left my poncho home and wore a rain jacket for 10 miles in the rain on the AT. This was in October, when nighttime temperatures were just above freezing. Everything in my pack was covered in plastic, and it all stayed dry. Even so, the pack had water all over it, which I found vaguely irritating when I stopped for the day. Maybe because I never had a wet pack before. If I hike in weather like that again, and I hope I do, I'll take a poncho. I will also take this Z-Pack's wind jacket to wear under it. It weighs 1.6 ounces, and the price was about $100 in 2022. Rain jackets do keep out wind, so I got this to replace mine. One question is what happens if a howling, pounding rainstorm catches us on the trail with no shelter in sight? Thanks to our modern smartphones, we stand a good chance of being able to check the forecasts daily on the AT. While cell signals are not available everywhere, they are frequent enough to make this a fairly safe bet. The afternoon before I took that 10-mile walk in the rain, every hiker I met knew that rain was coming. I keep my phone off most of the time and turn it on to see if I have a signal. Another option is to pitch our tent at the first decent spot we see and wait the rain out. More on this in a minute. And if all else fails, most people will have that modern rain jacket and that waterproof pack. Our next topic is the admonition against camping on the tops of big hills. One person who endorsed this approach cited the wind, saying the wind can be a big problem on such hilltops. I suspect a big reason behind that view is the design of many modern backpacking tents. Multiple models made by different manufacturers use guidelines to elevate the tent walls several inches above ground. I am confident that when confronted by a steady rain coming straight down, such tents will keep us dry. The potential problem is that winds of around 20 miles an hour or more tend to send rain flying half sideways. With elevated tent walls, good results might not be guaranteed. Yet, I have learned strong wind can hit us practically any place, as this photo shows. This campsite was surrounded by much taller hills, but the wind plastered snow on the tent walls right where the opening would be if they were elevated. I should add that I made this tent myself using sil nylon. I did a video about how I did it. The link is in the description. The video explains that I made this tent and others like it because I found commercial tents completely unsuited to the conditions in which I went backpack bow hunting. It was experiences like that snowfall, which predate my AT hikes, that led me to reject out of hand any tent with elevated walls once I knew such a thing existed. If everybody just has to have a tent with elevated walls, and for all I know maybe they do, yes, avoid hilltops. It might help. Maybe. But what if we have such a tent and we are forced to camp on a hilltop? I pose this question because I recall multiple days when a hilltop was the only flat spot I could find. I will also add I have never seen water collect on the top of a hill, which I consider another advantage. And here's another scenario. What if we are out hiking miles from any shelter and we see a big storm coming in fast? This photo shows my Gatewood Cape. This is designed to be pitched with elevated walls, and it comes with the guidelines to accomplish that. Every time I show a picture of mine here, I feel like I owe Six Moon Designs, the manufacturer, an apology. I say that because I do not use the guidelines, and I do not elevate the walls. I pitch it with the walls right on the ground. I do this to keep out the wind. My point in showing this is that I suspect many other similar designs can be pitched the same way as an expedient, and that would give us an option. My Gatewood Cape weighs only 10 ounces. It's small. Pitching the walls on the ground makes it a little bit smaller. Even so, I'm 5'9", and it's still big enough for me and my stuff to get inside and be covered. Also, I could have left the guidelines on and still pitched it with the walls right on the ground. This is easy enough to accomplish by putting the tent stakes through the loops that hold the guidelines and reducing the height of a trekking pole, because many designs rely on trekking poles to hold them up, and the Gatewood Cape is one of them. If wind is really bad, it can threaten to pull tent stakes out of the ground, particularly if we use hooked tent stakes that look like heavy wire, like these. Most of these are aluminum and can be pulled out with relative ease. The same applies to some similar stakes I own made of titanium. My answer to that was to buy these red stakes, which have a heavier rectangle cross-section. I got them because I can use a heavy rock and pound them into the ground right up to the notch without bending them. Compared to wire stakes, these are considerably harder to pull out of the ground. Because the tents I use have 4 main corners, that's where I use these stakes. There are other tent stake designs that can be used the same way. And to prove I'm really serious about wind, my homemade pyramid tents have wind flaps, which I stake to the ground. If it needs to be said, pyramid tents have been praised for about 100 years or so because they stand up so well to the wind. My homemade tents are floorless, and I use the Gatewood Cape the same way. And yes, I know, spiders and snakes and ticks will get inside, right? That has never happened to me, not once. This is the only spider I ever saw on the AT. Quite the monster, isn't it? I was right on the trail, nowhere near a tent. I've also read that a tick will not travel more than 3 feet when looking for a host. I have gotten moths inside my floorless tents, so if anybody hates moths, there is that. I also think about wind during hikes in cold months. Many insulated jackets we could use for backpacking come with no hood, and I will not take any cold weather outer layer on the AT without a hood. Lastly, we should ask if genuine gale force winds can be found on the AT. The answer is yes, absolutely. The AT runs through the Presidential Range and the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Rain and snow can blow through those high elevations at 80 miles an hour in June. That's right, 80-mile-an-hour snow in June. These are high-risk conditions, and everyone hiking there needs to know they can occur. Signs in that area frequently warn hikers to turn back if weather is bad, and we should obey those signs. And now we're done. I know I've been MIA for a while with videos, but rest assured more videos are coming. Since I last posted, I started a Twitter account, and link is in the description. I still have the Facebook page, but it was created as a news site, and Facebook does not recognize news sites. It considers my page a business page, which means that only a small fraction of the people who follow my page will see the posts unless I buy an advertisement. Twitter does not have that problem, at least not at the moment. And as always, thanks a million for watching.